Welcome back to Let's Talk to Animals, the podcast all species can enjoy together. My name is Shannon Cutts. I am an animal sensitive and intuitive, a Reiki master practitioner, and an animal communication teacher with animallovelanguages.com. And for our purposes here today, I am also your friendly neighborhood hostess and guide through the wild, wise, and wonderful world of interspecies communication. Call me crazy, but I truly believe that animal communication has the power to save, heal, and restore our planet for all species to enjoy and share. When we learn to communicate with one another, we begin to realize we are so much more alike than different. We care about each other. We become friends. On this podcast, we talk about what the animals have to say and share, and why our pets truly are our partners, empathic friends, and teachers. I am so glad you have joined us here for this fresh new episode of Let's Talk to Animals. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Let's Talk to Animals. Shannon here, and today I'm bringing you a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I recently wrapped up more than a year working on my brand new Animal Communication Adventure 2 Mastery program to create excellence in animal communication at whatever level you desire to practice it. Along the way, I had the unique opportunity to take a deep dive into various angles and topics that relate to animal communication in various ways and do a deep dive in those topics and really work out for myself why I felt there was such a strong connection and why that is significant for us as ever evolving communicators with our own species, with other species, with our personal pets, maybe with other pets if you're a student or a practitioner and you're listening, maybe even with wild animals, maybe you volunteer with shelter animals, rescued animals, rehabilitating wildlife. There are all kinds of applications. But one of the applications that is almost, I'm going to dare say, never talked about in animal communication circles, even at the professional level, is how learning animal communication makes you a better human communicator with your own species. So that would be me communicating with you, absolutely, but also me communicating within myself, with myself. And whether or not you are animal communication curious, whether you are currently considering enrolling in a program or a course of study, whether you might be a part of my practice circle, whether you are already in the trenches as an intermediate to advanced student or a practitioner, this is something worth pondering. It's been nothing short of life-changing for me, and it's why I so often share here and with my student community that animal communication is hands down the best self-help, self-development, and self-evolution program I have ever found. And to give you a little context on that, I am the teenager who would sneak out of the house, not to go party, not to go experience recreational substances, but I would go to self-help meetings. I would go to the self-help section of the library. Back when you could not order books online, I'm in my 5th decade of life now. So we are talking about the brick and mortar library where all the neighbors would show up as well. And I'd be hiding in the self-help section. So I think it's pretty easy to deduce from this that I was a little odd. Didn't have a lot of friends, didn't have a lot going on socially, but I had a rich inner life and a craving, a deep longing to understand what I couldn't put into words. And I feel like most of my life I've been on the search for what that is, that tangible, not nothing that I don't have a name for to make it into a something that I can communicate about with others, with my own species, to have that community, to have that connection, to have that shared journey. Well, animal communication has given me that name for it at last. It is what my college professor used to call the 90%. We deal as adult human animals almost completely in what he called the 10%. And here I'm talking about my college speech professor, and I'm talking about a speech class that I was enrolled in as part of my requirements to graduate with a bachelor's in business with a concentration in marketing. So, talking to people, connecting with people, despite all of my studies along the way and my constant search and quest for knowledge and insight, I wasn't very good at this. And so, as one of my prerequisites, I had to enroll in a speech class. And as our final exam, we had to present a 10-minute speech to our class, to our peers. And it was so interesting. I have forgotten a lot about those painful college years, but this I have never forgotten. Thank goodness. When the day came and I was giving my dry run for my final exam, and my professor said, "Oh, 90% of communication is nonverbal." And I thought, I think that matters. And then he went on to talk more about the 10%, the verbal content of my speech. And when I asked him about, well, what do you mean by nonverbal? He basically said, well, you need to make more eye contact. You need to connect with an individual in the back of the room. You need to gesture more, move your body. Don't stand there like a stick. And I thought, I just don't feel like that's all there is to it. Maybe you can relate. And it haunted me, especially as I graduated and moved into a marketing career with light sales involved, and just felt like my verbal skills were never enough to really accurately guide me through life in a way where I felt like I was trusting my words, trusting other people's words, and trusting my own relationship with what I was saying and what I was hearing. So that was where I started my journey. Where I landed was in animal communication, which I started really unpacking and unfolding and pursuing in earnest when I turned 50. And that's a whole other story. I have a whole podcast episode on how I became a professional animal communicator that you can seek out and enjoy when you have the time. But for our purposes here, I want to actually take you through one of the core modules from Animal Communication Adventure to Mastery, where I break down the difference between our adult focus on verbal conversation, exactly what you saw my professor doing when he was coaching me through my final exam speech, and the default speech for non-human animals, our pets, other pets, wild animals, which is that 90%, the non-verbal, the subtle, the sensory, the intuitive conversation, communication. Most animal communication students, when they come into the community of developing animal communicators for the first time, imagine that you're brand new. You've just enrolled in, let's say, Animal Communication Adventure to Mastery, or maybe you're taking one of my free courses like Intuitive You, which is a precursor, or Animal Communication Camp. And you are just beginning your journey and you're thinking the way we all think, the way I honestly thought when I first started my animal communication journey, that you were going to be learning something completely new, like enrolling in a speech class at college or taking accounting. Let me tell you, that was definitely brand new for me. It's still brand new, even after completing the course. But one of the first things that I want my animal communication students to know is that this isn't new at all. You are not learning something from scratch. You are remembering and reconnecting with your birth language, your original language, the universal language that all sentient life speaks. Now, maybe you're listening to me say that and you're thinking, no, I have never taken an animal communication course before. I cannot do that. I hire people to do that for me. If that's you, I totally relate. I hired people to do that for me too for many years before I discovered that I too could communicate with animals and then hung out a shingle and went pro, et cetera, et cetera. I was the pet parent client who hired animal communicators for years because I wanted to talk with my pet family. I believed that it was working because I could see the results after each conversation. So it wasn't just a blind belief. I was actually experiencing that my relationships with my animals, with my own pets, were changing. And that was what gave rise to the inner trust that we commonly label belief. So I had actually replaced belief with lived experience. And that's why I kept hiring animal communicators for years and years and years, is because I could see the results. I could feel the results. I just didn't know what was happening. And I definitely didn't know I could do it too. But let's rewind. Let's say you're just popping out of the womb. You are at ground zero. Your soul has just entered your body. You've just popped into the world. You don't even know that words exist. You can hear other bigger, older individuals around you making sounds. You don't even know that the sounds they're making are called words. You don't even have the word to describe words yet. And yet, somehow, you managed to survive that intensely, unbelievably vulnerable period of your life and get all of your basic needs met. Now, I'm not talking about the deep needs that turn us into the perfect person who is completely balanced from the inside out and the outside in. I'm talking about you got your food, you were able to go to the bathroom, you had a safe place to sleep, et cetera, et cetera. Somehow you survived that period in your life to be here now listening to me talk on this podcast. And yet, for the first at least 2 years for most of us, maybe some a little bit longer, at least for those first couple of years of your life, you didn't have the use of words. You hadn't learned any words yet. And even if you were advanced and learned a few words earlier, you still didn't know how to put them together. How did you get your needs met? How did you communicate to your caregivers or your parents or your nurses or your foster parents or your guardians, whomever was taking care of you? How did you communicate to them that you had needs, that you needed things, that you wanted things? Without words, how did you connect to share messages and to receive messages in return? All of us grow up through no fault of our own, and in most cases, through no fault of our caregivers and guardians. We grow up with scars, which are moments in our early life when we communicated a need that didn't get met. So we're not talking perfection here, but I'm talking about somehow you got fed, you got watered, you got changed, you got to rest, you had enrichment. Things happened in an atmosphere to allow you to grow up and to be here with me today. And you did all of that with no words. Mind boggling when you think about it, isn't it? So, how did that happen? That, my friends, is interspecies communication in a nutshell. This is a foundational principle you must understand if you want to experience animal communication as an adult. And I'm going to get into why in just a moment. But for now, what I want you to anchor to is your very first language was nonverbal in nature. It was subtle. It was sensory and intuitive. In other words, you were being guided from within. Intuition means inner teacher, inner guide. You were being guided from within. How did you know you were hungry and needed food if you didn't know the word for food? You didn't even know what food was. You didn't know that food was a word and it meant the thing that you were hungry for. You didn't know what hunger was. You didn't know that you needed to go to the bathroom. You didn't know that you were tired, but something inside you knew. A sensation, a vibration. You knew the difference between hungry and full. You could sense the difference between tired and energetic. You knew when you were feeling good versus when you'd come down with a little cold. Those are differences in sensation and vibration, frequency, which forms the basis of an internal, intuitive language that we speak with ourselves within ourselves. And we can share this language with other animals of all species, but here we're just talking about your primary human caregivers, because they know the differences in those vibrations, those sensations too. not only do you, freshly born, knowing nothing, left brain barely coming online, you're living almost entirely in your right brain when you are young. And I believe this is why when I was in India, the local people would tell me that when you look into the eyes of an animal or a child under the age of 2 years old, you look straight into the face of God or the divine or the eternal all that is, or the soul, or whatever you prefer to label it, to call it, whatever word you prefer to use to describe it. That which connects us all is available in force, with no veils, with no masks, when we look into the eyes of an animal or a child under the age of 2, because they are living almost entirely from the right brain hemisphere. If you want more scientific proof of this, you can read Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor's wonderful memoir, My Stroke of Insight. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroscientist and a brain specific researcher who experienced an early midlife stroke that knocked out her left brain hemisphere, but left her right brain hemisphere completely intact. And when you listen to her, if you listen to her TED Talk or you read her words in her book, My Stroke of Insight, you hear her describe the vast connectiveness that comes from relocating fully into the right brain hemisphere. And so that's where our young of any species lives. That's where our non-human planet mates mostly live. And that allows us to do something called entrainment, where we can attune to and intuit from the vibration that others are emanating or giving out, and understand without the need to use words what's going on and what they need. Some people call this telepathy. I break that down a whole lot more in my course, Animal Communication Adventure to Mastery. Telepathy is essentially a vehicle through which this nonverbal, subtle, sensory, and intuitive language can occur. So it's the label we've given to the process that actually exists underneath it. But here, what I'm talking about is, let's say you're an infant and you have a hunger spike. Your vibration, it's like you have a dial inside you that's like, where are you on the hunger meter? From 0, not hungry at all, totally full, totally happy, to I'm starving. It's an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. Well, when you turn up that volume, your caregiver senses it. This is why at first, when new moms and dads, they bring home their infant, they're like, it's crying, I don't understand what's going on, I don't know what it needs. And it's just like this impersonal exterior thing that I'm trying to learn what to do in this situation. And after a while, especially with the primary caregiver, whether that's the mom or the dad, we see almost like an intuitive knowing. Like everybody else is still like, why is it crying? And the primary caregiver is like, she's hungry, well, he needs a nap. And they just know, because that entrainment has taken place. A lot of times there's confusion about entrainment, which is a principle of quantum entanglement. And that's a deeper dive than we have time for on today's podcast episode. But suffice it to say that I teach about it in depth inside my mastery program. But entrainment essentially means that the dominant or strongest vibration has an attractive quality. It can draw our attention. And the easiest way to explain this is to take a look at what happens when somebody's staring at us from behind us. We don't have eyes, not physical eyes anyway, in the back of our heads. What we do have is an auric or etheric field, an energy field that is comprised of electricity and magnetism that extends up to 3 feet or even further beyond our physical exterior, the surface of our skin. And through the auric field, the energy emanating and being exchanged and shared and tuned into all around us, and even at a quantum level. And again, that's a little bit further and deeper than we have time to go, unless I wanted to make this 4-hour podcast. But just understand that this is the same principle of entrainment. When somebody is staring at us with intensity, something in us, our electromagnetic system is going to pick up on that and draw our attention towards it. That's actually a fight, flight, or freeze, a sympathetic nervous system function. that evolved to try to keep us alive so that we would notice the drooling, starving saber-toothed tiger behind the rock trying to look inconspicuous until just the right moment it can spring out and eat us. So that's where that evolved from. So we've got all kinds of bells and whistles. That's the whole point of me telling you this. We've got all kinds of bells and whistles in this super groovy spacesuit that we're wearing that we call our body, that most of us, at least if I'm even the most average of representative examples, we have no idea that it's even there. And just like my college example, we're certainly not given a lot of insight and information about it because most of the time our teachers don't know either. They know it exists. They know there's something going on, but either they haven't known what to call it enough to spark any kind of in-depth research, like the kind of research that I've done in the process of many years now of teaching and unfolding my mastery program in full. Most of the time, it's like a crapshoot to find two pieces that seem to be related to each other and then start putting the bigger puzzle together. And so that's what's important for you to understand for our purposes here today. How can learning animal communication make you a better communicator with other human animals? And most importantly, within yourself, is it teaches you to wake up to all of the communication that is going on, starting with this birth language, this nonverbal, sensory, subtle, intuitive, yet very powerful language of shared vibration. You can probably tell the difference between somebody who's feeling happy and someone who's feeling unhappy or angry or frustrated or upset or sad, even if you don't know them well, even if you're only talking with them on the phone or even over email or text, can't you often just get a subtle vibe, their inner state? What's going on with you? Do you ever pass somebody on the street or have someone standing behind you in line at the checkout counter and you just feel like your heart goes out to them? Or you feel like you need to get out of line because you need to get away from their energy? Have you ever had people respond to you differently based on how you're feeling? When you smile, the world smiles with you. When you frown, the world frowns with you. It's not 100% of the time, but it's pretty accurate. Start noticing this. Bring your conscious awareness to it and start noticing the 90%, the communication that is never spoken. It's never brought forth through words in most cases because there's so much of it. If we spoke into words the fullness of our communications, our two-way communications with anyone else, even within ourselves, we'd be here all day. There isn't enough time to speak it all into words. And here's another important facet. Because nonverbal sensory intuitive conversation is a right brain function, it can't be encapsulated into literal, analytical, rational words in the way we use our left brain speech and language comprehension centers, Broca's area and Wernicke's area, to use to speak and receive, to listen to decode and translate verbal language. So there's so much communication going on that we can't actually, we don't even have words for because we don't need them. The only time we actually need words is when we want to share something with another being, typically a being of our own species. Yes, of course, we use words to communicate with our dogs, with our cats, with our parrots, with varying degrees of success. I can hold my hand up and say, "Petal, come, fly to mommy," all day long. Most of the time, she just ignores me. She knows what it means, but she just ignores me. Same thing with our dachshund. With a dachshund, everything has to be his idea. He has to at least think it's his idea or he is not going to do it. So we can use our words all day long. Of course, our animals understand them, whether or not they agree with what we're asking them to do or choose to do it or not is something else entirely. But that's asking others to meet us more than halfway. And if we want to develop deep soul level relationships with our interspecies family members, we have to be willing to at least meet them halfway, which is where I am visioning forward into a world where I guess I become obsolete because everybody knows how to do what I do. Everybody has relearned this lost art, this birthright, birth language that we use to survive our first couple years of life. So let's move on now and let's talk about what happens when we get to be about 2 years old. We get to be about two, most of us. We start learning a word or two. What happens when we bust out with our first word? Lollipop or mom or dad or duck or whatever it is. Well, all the adults around us get so excited and we like that energy. And that motivates us to learn more and more and more words because we get positive attention. We get affirmations. We get applause. We get to be the center of attention at parties. We like that. We earn the good energy of our caregivers, our parents, our teachers, our guardians, the people who still hold some degree of power over us. And our bread is buttered on the side of pleasing them. And so, what do we do quite naturally without even ever really contemplating it? Because we've got so much going on. We're making so many new neural connections. We have to prioritize. And we're like, okay, this is a good thing. I get positive attention. I'm going to learn more words. And so, we don't lose access to our birth language, this nonverbal language that we started out our life with, but we lose interest in it. We lose awareness of it. And through a process of what one of my mentors, Don Miguel Ruiz, the Toltec shaman, calls domestication, we quite naturally, without it ever even really contemplating it, we downgrade the importance of it until we start to pretend it doesn't exist. And verbal language, with its left brain centric focus, its individuation focus, it's very individual minded, me versus you versus me. It's like the good of the whole gets factored out and the good of the individual gets factored in. We just turn off our senses in the arena of the nonverbal, the 90%. We forget about it for a while. Nobody's talking about it. So we don't either. And I think that is actually what sent me to the self-help section of the library and those self-help groups for so many years. As a young person, it's like something's not right here. And I grew up in a family with a lot of interesting and very, very loud subtext. Maybe you can relate to that. You had maybe parents that didn't always get along perfectly. You had siblings you didn't get along with. And so there was a lot going on underneath the words. I knew it. I felt like there was something missing. And because there wasn't anyone to talk to about it, and I couldn't find the books to describe it to me in words, I internalized it as, well, there's just something wrong with me. And I feel like a lot of us, I'm not trying to generalize it, this doesn't pertain to you, but just taking a look at many of the students that I've mentored and coached individually, as well as the people that I've worked with, we tend to be a little bit more on the end of the highly sensitive and the empathic. We tend to be just wired in a way that we can't ever fully turn off our awareness of the subtext, what I'm calling the subtext or the nonverbal. And so we tend to go through life either externalizing that, as in the world is trying to get me. I'm being victimized and I need to protect myself. So I'm going to wall myself off and I'm going to seek out the animals because they're safe and they love me unconditionally and they can accept my unconditional love. Or we tend to develop very porous boundaries where, well, I'm always the one that's at fault. I'm just broken somehow. And so any little tidbit of kindness, I just soak it up like a sponge and the animals fill me up because the world keeps emptying me out. And so that tends to be, for a lot of us, that's where we enter into a more intentional choice to want to communicate with animals, to really want to understand what we're sensing and feeling, because it's healing and it's safe and it's reliable. And so that's where we enter the picture. And that's where the self-development and the self-evolution, where self-help really gets its rocket thrusters, at least from my experience and from many of the students that I've coached. And we find out, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with anyone else. We just have only been working with about 10% of the big picture. We've been trying to live all of life from one brain hemisphere, the left brain hemisphere, instead of integrating the knowledge and the insight and the guidance available when we use both of our brain hemispheres and use them appropriately for the purposes for which they have been designed to work well. Don't get me wrong. If we can't use words effectively, if we can't receive the nonverbal, sensory, subtle, and intuitive information that the animal wants to share with us, and then decode it, translate it into words, and share it with that animal's pet parent or guardian or foster carer or shelter manager or rehabber or whoever it is, we can't help that animal. We really can't do anything. So the left brain mind, with its verbal capacity, with its language comprehension and its speech capabilities, is very necessary. It has a very important job to do in the animal communication process. And again, I go over all of this in probably excruciating detail with my students inside the new mastery program. But just understand, your verbal language skills are not going to be wasted here. All those years you spent getting really good at learning to use your words are going to come in very handy. So you're not behind the 8 ball. You just need to remember that this isn't your only language. There's a really fun story that I just shared over on my Instagram at Love and Feathers and Shells. And it's about one of my earlier animal communication experiences when I was talking with a German Shepherd named Chief. Chief had just transitioned to spirit. His mom, Betty, was really missing him and hired me to help them reconnect and communicate across the veil or across the etheric field, or however you want to look at that. And as I tuned in with Chief and was starting to get to know him, he showed up and he was full of energy and he just started barking and wagging his tail and moving his body and moving his ears different ways. And I was a little overwhelmed. And I said to him, very honestly, I said, "What are you doing?" Chief said to me, "How many languages do you know?" And I said, 2, if you count animal communication, although I'm not doing very well with you right now. I don't know what you're doing. And he said, "Well, I'm teaching you German Shepherd." And that was a fabulous experience to have. But here's Betty on the other side of the conversation waiting for translation. So I was very glad to have the capability to take all of that subtle, nonverbal, sensory, and intuitive information that Chief was giving me and be able to quickly translate it into words so I could share what Chief was doing and saying with me with her. And that just lit her up, because that is exactly how Chief was in his life. He was a natural teacher, a natural leader, a natural guide, full of enthusiasm. And she could totally see him doing something like that. So we want to have those left brain capabilities. Now, here's something else. I run across communicators in my field sometimes, and I'm not throwing any stones or casting any shade, but I'm just saying, when you run across an animal communicator that says something like, "Well, the animals just talk to me like you and I would talk together," that doesn't mean that's how it happens. That means they're really good at what they do, and it feels natural for the nonverbal data or information to flow in through their subtle senses and end up decoded and translated as shareable words. Now, sometimes these communicators are communicators who just were born with a blaringly wide open channel, intuitive channel. They would have been raised by very intuitive guardians or parents. Maybe the parents or the guardians were in the intuitive arts themselves. They were encouraged. And a great example of this is to read Diary of a Psychic by one of my main intuitive teachers, Sonia Choquette. And she talks about being raised by a highly intuitive mother who trusted her vibes and taught her daughters to do the same. So sometimes you get the early mechanics. And so you never go through this process of forgetting about your birth language. Sometimes you just arrive with the inner knowing, maybe from time spent in a past life. I don't know any better than the next person why this sometimes happens. I've talked with a few communicators who really resist the idea of teaching animal communication because they just could always do it and don't believe it can be taught. They think it's a gift. You either have it or you don't. Some mediums feel the same. I don't agree because late in life, relatively speaking, I went from totally not believing it to becoming fluent. So for me, my lived experience is different. And that's why I say I'm not throwing any stones. I'm not judging anyone else because I'm not living their lives. I'm just letting you know that you too can do this because we all share in this original birth language, being able to get our needs met, communicate what we need to communicate to survive without having any facility for words at all. So, where does the self evolution and self development part of learning animal communication really start to work in our favor as adults trying to navigate this increasingly busy, overloaded, nonstop daily adulting life that we lead? Well, it comes with being able to bring our two brain hemispheres together, just like we've been talking about. We listen to the words. We also listen to all the rest, the subtext, how we feel. Here's a really easy example I often teach when I do my intuitive development for pet parents webinars. And in fact, I'm about to do another series. So if you're not on my weekly love letter, head over to animallovelanguages.com and the little banner that pops up, just enter your information and you'll be notified when my next webinar is. But one of the things that I do inside this webinar is I walk participants through a series of exercises designed to reawaken awareness of your intuition, of your nonverbal communication, inbuilt communication system. And I'll give you a little example of it right now. Think of a lemon. Depending on which of your subtle senses are most awake or most open, or the ones that you use most frequently, we have all of them. Nobody is only clear seeing or clear hearing or clear knowing, but early in life, we will develop and rely on one pathway, typically a little bit more than all the others, as that tends to be our go-to. So for some of you, maybe you tasted the tartness of the lemon and maybe your mouth even puckered a little. Some of you, maybe you saw a round yellow fruit. Some of you, maybe you heard the word lemon. Some of you, maybe you just knew that lemon had entered your consciousness. Those are just some examples. Maybe some of you smelled the citrusy smell of lemon. Maybe some of you sensed or felt the acidic or the kind of drying sensation of having lemon juice touch your skin. So those are examples of different subtle sensory pathways. And you know the difference between lemon and pizza. You knew that you were just experiencing lemon in some way, maybe in several of the ways that I just described, and not pizza. This is an example of this birth language. And in the same way that you know the difference between lemon and pizza, you know the difference between another human or a non-human who is in your range of awareness or perception, who is happy versus sad, who is healthy versus sick, who is tired versus energetic. So these are just the basic bare bones building blocks. Imagine if you were having a conversation with your boss or your partner or your child or your best friend, and you could not only tune into their words, but you could hear and receive all the rest of it, both what they knew they were sharing with you and what they probably didn't know they were sharing with you. How much more resilient, adaptable, empathic, compassionate could you be? How could you so much better shape your interactions for the highest good if you were working with all of the information available to you? The same holds true more than anyone else with yourself. It has taken me years to just be able to name what I'm feeling. I know that sounds so lame. And now you're like, oh my God, I never want to hire her as a teacher or a communicator because she doesn't know what she's feeling. I do now, but it took me years. And a really good example of this is a student that I was coaching a couple months ago who came to me and she said, I don't feel. And that's why I feel blocked as an animal communication student, is because I don't feel anything. I don't know what I'm feeling. And when I started unpacking this with her, I became aware that she had picked up a belief that you only feel things in your heart, in your chest region. And she would go to her heart, to her chest region, and look for the feeling. keen to label it with a word. And because she didn't necessarily find anything there, she thought, well, I just can't feel. I'm numb. I'm stuck. I'm blocked. There's something wrong with me. You probably know where that conversation goes. We get on that mental train and it never lets us off. And we convince ourselves that we're broken. We're not broken. Emotions can happen anywhere in the body. They can happen as any of the different sensory impressions that we just talked about, something we see, hear, smell, taste, sense, feel, or simply know. They can come through as emotion, as a feeling. The emotion just means energy in motion. So they can come through as a feeling. Oh, I feel sad. Oh, my heart hurts. Well, when your heart hurts, that's actually a physical sensation. When I've gone through heartbreak, my dad passing, my heart hurt. It hurt. There is such a thing as heartbreak syndrome, and it can be deadly, mimics the effects of a heart attack. And only after death can you see that actually no cardiac arrest took place. So if you think feeling can't physically hurt, this is the moment when you realize maybe you too haven't been looking for all of your emotions in all the right places. Emotion can come across as drop in energy, a headache, back aches. Oh my goodness, the 3 herniated discs in my back have stories to tell you. And that is a lingering side effect of so many years of feeling like I can't feel, so I can't cry, so I can't get the cortisol out of my body. Well, no wonder my whole body broke down in my 40s and my thyroid shut down and I started breaking out in hives, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm still working my way through that. But in the process, I've learned that my body is a feelings machine. It's always emitting sensations, vibrations, emotions, energy, and motion. And so is yours. And so is everyone else's, regardless of species. And so this, my friends, in a nutshell, is how learning animal communication can make you a better human communicator with other humans, most importantly, within yourself. It can help you wake up to the fullness of you, the wealth of you, the depth of you, the amazing capabilities of you, the power within you. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode today. I look forward, as always, to your shares, your wisdom and insights, always your questions, because they help me shape future episodes, and to coming over and joining me inside Animal Communication Adventure to Mastery and Animal Communication Adventure Practice Circle, where I guide you through the deep, full version of what I just touched on today. And then we practice it together with one another as fellow adventurers along this path, with other pet parents and their animals, with your animals, with wild animals. And we learn and we grow and we unfold and evolve together. So if that sounds like fun to you, head over to animallovelanguages.com, click on programs, and you can learn more. And until then, I send you all my love. Okay, bye for now. I have so enjoyed sharing this episode with you. If you're new to the Let's Talk to Animals community and you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on your favorite streaming service or drop a comment wherever you like to listen. I love to hear from you, and your feedback truly helps me shape future episodes based on your interests and needs. If you're not already in my weekly love letters community, head over to animallovelanguages.com to opt in. Your welcome email will include $25 off your first pet session with me, and you'll be the first to know when a new podcast episode drops. If you're interested in learning more about the work I do communicating with animals, offering pet Reiki, and teaching animal communication, please visit me at animallovelanguages.com. Click on Schedule for Pet Sessions and Programs for all the information about my new Animal Communication Adventure to Mastery student program and the live animal communication practice circle I run for student practitioners. And I look forward to welcoming you back here very soon for a fresh new episode of Let's Talk to Animals. Okay, all my love. Bye for now.